you guys are going to have to help me because I don't want to have my chat open. So on the homework, we're going to do number 1 together. So I'm going to do number 1, and then I'm going to give you time to do number 2 and 3 because they're very similar. And then I'll do number 4, and then you can do 5 and 6. One of them goes by really quickly, and the other one is going to take a little bit more work because it's going to have multiple variables. All right, so looking at number 1 here, what we want to do first is we want to group all the like variables together and then see what we get. So if we group all the a's together, we have a to the 9th, a squared, and then just a. So if a is by itself, it's a 1. So what I do when we're multiplying with the same base, we add these. So 9 plus 2, 9, 10, 11, 12 is where they get the a to the 12th here. And then we're going to do the same thing for the b's. So group that one. Actually, anything to the 0 power, you can just ignore because anything to the 0 is just a 1. And if it's a 1, you don't need it. So I'm going to ignore that one and then just combine these two together. Because if I add 0, nothing's going to change. And b cubed. So here I'm going to add those two together. So b is going to be 4 plus 3 is 7. And that's the one that it wants, but I'm going to finish all of them. And then c, negative 4, 5, and negative 1. So I'm adding all of these together because all of them are c, so I can combine them. Negative 4 plus 5 is positive 1. And then I have a negative 1. So positive 1 and negative 1 make 0. And then, like I said before, anything to the 0 power just goes away. That's why this doesn't have a c on it, because it's technically c to the 0, but if it's 0, we don't even have to write it. So here, all we need to do is type in the missing exponent, which is the 7. So b is 7. That's all we do here. Okay, so you go ahead and do number 2. Number 2 should be fairly quick because you're just going to add them together because you only have one variable. But then number 3 might take you a little bit more time because you have to combine the numbers and then the variables. You'll probably have multiple variables. So problem number 4 here deals with the dividing ones. So we got to combine our variables vertically together and see what we get. So notice here the missing ones this time are inside the problem. It's not asking for the answer. It's asking for what does that number need to be in order to give you that answer. So we're going to combine the numbers together. 18 and 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So that's where the 9 comes from. Again, I'm going to do all of them. Technically, we only have to do the z's, but I'm going to do the other ones just to review what the property is. All right, and then we combine the x's together. So when we divide, we subtract. 9 minus 4 is 5. And then we combine the y's together. So 3, and remember if there's not an exponent there, it's a 1. So 3 minus 1 is where they get the 2. So we know we have to subtract the z's. So this one is where it gets a little tricky because I know I have to do negative 3 minus some number. That's the question mark. That's what I'm looking for. And what does that number have to be in order for it to equal 7? So you can kind of do guessing and checking. It's not 4. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. I don't want 4. I got to figure out what does this number need to be. So if you can't figure it out off the top of your head, you can set up a equation and solve for x. So let's say instead of box here, I call this thing x, and then I can solve for it. So negative 3 minus x is 7. So you don't have to do this all the time. You just do this when you can't figure out the number off the top of your head. Sometimes you can figure it out. Oh, 2 minus 3, okay, well then it has to be 1. But other times you actually have to solve for it. So I'm going to add 3 to the 7. So I get negative 1x equals 10. So then divide it by negative 1, x would be negative 10. So that would be the missing exponent that I would need, negative 10 here. That would be the missing exponent that I need to make negative 7. And again, you can check it. Negative 3 minus, because I'm subtracting, negative 10. When it's a negative and a negative together, I end up adding those numbers. So negative 3 plus 10 is 7, which is what we need. Okay, so this one is like the hardest. I purposely picked the harder ones to do together. That way you don't get any of these harder ones on the homework. A lot of the other ones you'll just be able to kind of guess and check the number. But this one we actually had to solve for it because it wasn't as easy to find. So here you would just type in negative 10 as the missing exponent. All right, so for question number 5, you're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be easier because there's just one. So one variable, subtract them, that's it. Number 6, again, it's going to have multivariable ones, but hopefully it won't be as difficult as that first one was. All right, so I'll give you a couple minutes to do 5 and 6, and then we'll come back and do 7. So 5, 6 you should have done. So we're going to do number 7 together. And then I got to go check which other ones. So this one's the power to a power one. So we don't actually have to set up equations this time because it's fairly simple to get what the number should be. So remember, when we have an exponent on the outside, we take that exponent and we apply it to everything on the inside. So I always start right to left. So I apply it to the z first. When I have an exponent, a power to a power, z, we multiply those exponents together. So z squared to the 4th, I'm going to multiply those and get 4 times 2 is 8. So the exponent on the z is going to be 8. And then I apply it to the y. So y cubed to the 4th, I multiply those two together and get 12. So the exponent on the y is 12. Now here for the x, when we apply it, I already know what the answer is. It's going to be a 20. So what does this number need to be so that when I multiply it by 4, I get 20? So what times 4 is 20? Again, you can set up an equation here, but it's easier just to guess and check the answer. So 5 times 4 makes 20. So the missing exponent is going to be a 5. So you don't always have to set up an equation to solve for x. Just set it up when you need to, when it's not easy to figure out. All right, so that's all you need for this one. Again, 8 and 9 are going to be pretty similar. 8 should be fairly quick because there's only one thing you got to do. 9 might take you some time because there's multiple ones, I think. Yeah, there's only going to be one here. And then, again, there's multivariables that you're going to have to do. Okay, so then the other one is number 10. This one deals with the negative exponents. So you could be adding or subtracting or multiplying. The rules get mixed up here, but you're always going to end up with some kind of negative. So then you have to make it a positive. So let's look at the one that's already done for us. The y's are already done. So if we look at the y's, here we combine them. So when we divide, we're subtracting 6 minus 4. And that's how we get positive 2. Because it's on the top, that means it's a positive 2. For the x's, I'm going to have some number, and I'm going to subtract 7 from it to get a 2, but since the x is on the bottom, that means it has to be a negative 2. So what number would we subtract to get negative 2? And again, if you can't figure out that, well then set up an equation. If we make this x minus 7 equals negative 2, and then we can just solve for x by adding 7. Sometimes you can just figure it out by guessing and checking, But if you can't figure it out, just make that missing number an x and solve just like we normally do. So negative 2 plus 7 makes 5. So 5 minus 7 gives us negative 2. So 5 is the missing number there. So the missing number on the x is a 5. And then we want to do the missing number on the z. So for the z, we actually don't have to solve for this one because we're just looking for the answer. So we're going to do negative 2 minus, because you're always subtracting, negative 8. And we want to know, what does that exponent equal? So what is this going to be equal to? So here, when I have a negative and a negative together, negative and a negative, I'm going to end up adding these two. That's where you have to be careful with the negatives. If you have a negative on the bottom, you're going to end up adding it. So negative 2 plus 8 is 6. So then this number is going to be 6. So sometimes you just got to combine your numbers together. Other times you have to solve for them. So if you can't figure out the missing number, well then set up an equation and solve for it. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to have time for the other ones. Let me see. What were the other ones I was going to do with you? So I did 10. So we have 13 and 15. And then in between those, there's only like one problem that you have to do. So here's 13. And then 15 is a multiple choice one.